Well, wonderful. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I'm Bojana Bellamy. I lead Center for Information Policy Leadership. And please allow me very briefly, just for those of you who do not know us, we are global privacy and data policy think and do tank operating out of London, Washington, and Brussels. And we work on this intersection of data, technology, best practices, and law. And in fact, this very topic about privacy enhancing technologies, privacy preserving technologies is a great example of the multi-stakeholder project that we've been now running for a couple of years. So maybe just to kind of anchor this conversation today, and you are in wonderfully able hands of Matthew Reisman, our director, and Eden Taib, who is our PETs fellow, but does other things, emerging technologies as well, and fabulous set of panelists, experts in these technologies. But just to anchor why we are talking about privacy enhancing technologies and why did CIPL embark on this project? So in 2023, sort of the past 2 years, really, we've been working consistently on the topic of privacy enhancing technologies because we do believe in their huge potential. First of all, they are part of organizational accountability. So organizations who care about their data, who care about their data stewardship, who care about protection of data and security of data, but also want to be able to leverage and use data, do need to invest in these technologies. It is important that regulators understand how technologies also work, because the big advantage of using PETs is to enable or streamline legal compliance, right? Very often, technology is in tension or conflicts with some of the privacy requirements, and it makes it very difficult to comply. So by using privacy enhancing technologies, actually, we are helping our organizations be in compliance with data protection rules. And I think this is something that regulators need to understand also and incentivize and confirm as well. And then the final point is one that more and more we keep hearing. Data is the most important asset of everybody, every company, every government. And how do we share and how do we transfer and are able to use data and leverage that data as an asset in a way that protects privacy, but also protects the integrity of the data, protects our intellectual property? Frankly, PETs have got a very important role to play in that as well. And I know that you will be hearing also from OECD, and this is exactly the reason why OECD has also been promoting privacy enhancing technologies, because it's the way in which we are able to leverage this incredibly important asset. And so very briefly, as I said, we started working on this a couple of years ago. Our first paper, please have a look at that, does a deep dive into some of these key privacy preserving technologies. It explains the technologies, it gives case studies that we've collected with a number of our members, number of key tech and vendor providers in this space, and we try to demystify how they work and where they can be useful. And very importantly, this first paper also suggests how these PETs may be helping us achieve privacy compliance. Now we are moving forward on this project. We've decided to look into the sectoral applications of PETs. So today, we're going to be hearing about our latest paper, which is the PETs in the whole life cycle of AI. But as I've said, we're going to be doing more work looking into PETs in financial services, PETs in healthcare as well, and PETs in ad tech. So with that, I hope that gives you a bit of background and information as to why we at CIPL care about this topic, why we think it is an essential topic for every privacy, data governance, chief data officer, but also data protection authorities. We believe in the potential of PETs, but as you will hear, they are not a panacea, they're not complete solution, yet they enable that important risk mitigation. So with that, I'm going to ask Eden to please introduce this latest paper in our stable of papers on the PETs in AI. Over to you, Eden.
Thank you, Bojana. Some of you may have seen that last month, as part of our ongoing PETs project, we released a new white paper focusing specifically on how PETs are being used in the context of AI. As Bojana mentioned, this new paper builds on our earlier one from 2023. In this new paper, we dive into how these tools can help address privacy challenges in AI systems across the full AI lifecycle. To start us off today, I will share with you an overview of our new paper, our key findings, and our recommendations. Now, PETs are powerful tools for protecting privacy and cybersecurity in AI, while still allowing for the responsible use and sharing of data. In fact, they are becoming essential business enablers, helping organizations unlock data that might otherwise be unavailable. They also play a critical role in safeguarding sensitive information, commercial interests, and helping with compliance. That said, as Bojana also mentioned, PETs are not a panacea. They do not work in every situation, and they often involve trade-offs between data utility and privacy protection. Therefore, PETs should be seen as part of a broader privacy and risk management toolkit. Our paper aims to show how PETs can help operationalize privacy by design and default and serve as key business enablers. It also seeks to demonstrate how PETs can address challenges and provide new opportunities across the AI lifecycle, and includes real-world case studies to illustrate practical application and benefits. Now, as the table on screen demonstrates, PETs can help across the AI lifecycle stages, from data sourcing to model deployment. Different PETs are most effective when applied at various stages of the AI lifecycle, and in many circumstances, using PETs in combination can achieve the best outcomes. While there are a variety of PETs available for each stage of the AI lifecycle, for the purpose of this presentation, I will highlight just a select few. But for a more comprehensive overview, I encourage you to read our paper. To help with data sourcing, synthetic data can provide large volumes of data valuable for model training or testing. It can provide data where there may be a shortage of diverse data available. Regarding model training, federated learning plays a key role by allowing multiple parties to collaborate on training a model, keeping the data on local devices and sharing only model updates, not the raw data. Secure multi-party computation enables collaborative model training by allowing parties to compute on shared data without revealing raw inputs. Many PETs also mitigate security risks. Homomorphic encryption encrypts and secures data during transmission, storage, and computation, and fully homomorphic encryption is resistant to quantum attacks. Trusted execution environments enhance security by isolating data in encrypted environments, accessible only to authorized users and code, with attestation mechanisms ensuring integrity. Various PETs facilitate collaboration. Differential privacy enables collaboration when training models without disclosing data, as each party adds noise themselves. Federated learning and analysis facilitate multi-party model training, allowing collaboration without centralizing raw data. Different PETs enable model validation while preserving privacy. Trusted execution environments enable model testing on confidential data within secure, isolated environments, showing only aggregated validation results. And secure multi-party computation enables model validation by exchanging encrypted data, ensuring neither test data nor model data is revealed. And lastly, PET supports secure model deployment. Homomorphic encryption can allow users to input encrypted data into a model, keeping it secure until the user decrypts the final output. Federated learning and analysis enhance model deployment by processing data locally on user devices, reducing the need for large-scale data transfers and only sending processed results. Now, PETs also offer a number of other advantages for use in AI beyond privacy. They can improve data quality. PETs can help generate high-quality, diverse, and representative data sets that can be used to train models. For instance, synthetic data can be used to address a shortage of data, helping to address bias and leading to more fair and accurate outputs. As mentioned, PETs enable collaboration. PETs such as secure multi-party computation enable multiple organizations to collaboratively develop AI models. This solution enables the training of models on data that they might otherwise not be able to access. PETs can also foster trust. By offering secure data sharing, PETs like homomorphic encryption allow data to be shared between parties while maintaining the integrity of the data used in AI systems. PETs can help personalize services. By allowing data to be collected and combined from multiple sources, PETs can allow organizations to personalize AI services for customers without compromising their privacy. PETs can also enhance security, as mentioned. Many PETs mitigate security risks, including trusted execution environments, by helping to prevent adversaries from accessing and tampering with the data. And finally, from our findings, we offer the following recommendations to boost the adoption of PETs and overcome challenges in their use in the context of AI. Firstly, regulators should incentivize proactive dialogue, further research, and experimentation within regulatory sandboxes. Encouraging collaboration with regulatory sandboxes will promote ongoing dialogue and knowledge exchange between key stakeholders, helping to develop adaptable regulatory frameworks that keep pace with PETs. Secondly, regulators should issue more clear and practical guidance to reduce regulatory uncertainty in the use of PETs in AI. While regulators increasingly recognize the value of PETs, clearer and more practical guidance is needed to help organizations implement these technologies effectively. For instance, regulators should avoid setting unnecessarily stringent standards for determining if a particular PET achieves compliance with a specific data protection principle. Regulators should also adopt a risk-based approach to assess how PETs can meet standards for data anonymization, providing clear guidance to eliminate uncertainty. A risk-based approach to defining anonymization standards could encourage wider adoption of PETs. Deployers should take steps to provide contextually appropriate transparency to customers and data subjects. Given the complexity of PETs, deployers should ensure customers and data subjects understand how PETs function within AI models. Deployers should also take care to ensure that clear mechanisms exist for data subjects to exercise their rights, where applicable, as PETs may alter the data in ways that affect data subject rights. Deployers must balance protecting privacy with data utility considerations. While protecting privacy is crucial, deployers must also ensure that PETs do not impede the utility of data for AI development. And policymakers and industry must work together to address the demand for large computing resources. The use of PETs in AI, especially generative AI, can require substantial computing resources. Policymakers and industry need to work together to ensure adequate resources are available. And finally, stakeholders should adopt a holistic view of the benefits of PETs in AI. PETs deliver value beyond addressing privacy and security concerns. They also foster trust, improve regulatory compliance, and enable data sharing while protecting sensitive information. It is crucial that stakeholders consider all these advantages when making decisions about their use. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Matthew Reisman, who will moderate today's expert discussion on how these tools are unlocking new opportunities in AI. Thank you.
Ed, thank you so much. And Bojana, thank you so much for your introductory remarks. Hello, everyone, wherever you may be in the world today. I'm Matthew Reisman. I'm a director of privacy and data policy at CIPL's Washington, D.C. office. I've had the good fortune to work on our research project on PETs since joining CIPL back in January of 2023. And then prior to that, in industry, was working on PETs. So I've been delighted to see CIPL's work help illuminate the values that Ed and Bojana have described for how PETs can both lift up privacy and innovation. One of the hallmarks of our papers that we have published has been trying to bring to life these lessons with case studies of actual implementation, and we're going to do a notch better than that today. I am so excited to have with us a remarkable panel of practitioners, of policymakers, of regulators, of researchers who can really help us illuminate the lessons that Eden has described for us from our paper and show how they're actually being applied and tackled in the real world. So without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to each of our panelists to introduce themselves and their affiliation and also their connection to PETs. So I'm going to go in the order printed on the agenda that was distributed with the call today. So Paul, beginning and over to you.
Hi everyone. My name is Paul Comerford. I'm with the Information Commissioner's Office. I'm a Principal Technology Advisor. My connection to PETs, I was one of the leads developing the ICO PETs guidance we released a couple of years ago. And also I was the lead for the recent ICO guidance on anonymization. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Michel, over to you. Michel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I was just trying to unmute myself. So yes, I'm Michel, I'm the head of technology, innovation, and AI at the French Data Protection Agency, the CNIL, French CNIL, and you know, basically in charge of technological issues at CNIL, and in particular the evaluation of pets and how they can impact our regulation, especially the implementation of GDPR. So more than happy to share my views and exchange with my peers on, you know, on issues, especially pets and in AI.
Thank you, Michel. We're honored to have you with us. Okay, next over to Christian.
Yes, hello everyone. So Christian Reimsbach, working for many years here at the OECD on digital economy policy issues. And I'm a senior information economist and policy analyst. And we published essentially back in 2020 first PETs paper or chapter, let's say, that we introduced in the G20 discussion. And we saw the big interest. There was a follow-up report that some of you may know, 2023, on emerging privacy-enhancing technologies. And now we are basically about to publish a report also on pets and AI. And we have been holding a series of workshops that some of you know. I'm also very happy to see some of the familiar faces. So looking forward to the discussion. And thank you for having us.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you for your leadership in this space. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Holland. I'm on Google's public policy, and government affairs team, and I'm our global lead for privacy enhancing technologies. I've been working on it since I think one of our first regulatory submissions on pets way back in 2018. I work with researchers in our product teams around the world and across our products to figure out what their work is, how it's going to impact the policy and regulatory landscape, how we can share our expertise, our long-term kind of development of pets and using them across our products, and inform the broader debate and inform their work as well. So excited for this conversation today.
We're excited to have you. Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to go next to Antigoni.
Thank you, and thanks for organizing the session. So my name is Antigoni Polychroniadou. I'm a research director in AI research at JP Morgan, and I'm also the head of AlgoCrypt Center of Excellence in JP Morgan. So my connection to pets is that I come from research. So I did my PhD 10 years ago, and then I was at Cornell, and 6 years ago I joined JP Morgan. And our goal is to do research on secure multi-party computation and all these pets technologies. And actually, we are like the first bank to apply secure computation in production. That happened 3 years ago with a product called Prime Match. And it was very challenging. So it's like, it's great that we can combine both research and secure computation. So this is our role that we have in JP Morgan.
Thank you, Antigoni. We're excited to hear about this marrying of research and application. Alexandra, last but definitely not least, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and I share the excitement. I'm very much looking forward to this interesting lineup and conversation. I'm Alexandra Ebert. I'm mostly AI's Chief AI and Data Democratization Officer, which is a leader in the space of privacy-safe synthetic data. But I'm here today in my capacity as chair of the IEEE Global Group on Synthetic Data, which is focusing particularly on privacy.
Thrilled to have you with us. Thank you, Alexandra. All right, we'd like to now that we've had the introductions, I'm going to go back in the same order of introductions that we've done to ask each of our speakers to begin with some opening remarks, especially reflecting on the paper that Evan has described and what stood out to you. Were there any particularly surprising or important insights or conclusions? And if there's anything you disagreed with, please feel free to flag that as well. Paul, I'll let you have the first word. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So I would say that CIPL is very influential in this space, and it is very encouraging indeed to see these set of recommendations to the various stakeholders involved in the pets ecosystem. I think the recommendations that were made in the paper align very well with our policy positions on pets, anonymization, and AI in general. I think the recommendations both to regulators and other stakeholders will help to stimulate further activity in this space. We acknowledge that there is a lot of work to be done, and we've also done some of our own work in this space to try to drive PETs adoption alongside other organizations such as OECD as well. I think in terms of recommendations for regulators, I agree with a lot of those. I think regulatory certainty is very important, and it's something we strive to achieve through our guidance and developing useful case studies for organizations to use as a blueprint for developing PETs. I think in terms of your report, I think it's great to see some useful, viable case studies in there that illustrate how PETs can be implemented to reduce risks to individuals. It was great to see how PETs can map to various parts of the AI lifecycle and how that can be valuable to organizations looking to use PETs to mitigate risks to individuals. And also the broader advantages section of the report is really useful, I think, as well. As well as the well-known risks to the AI, I think it went a step further than that, so it was really great to see. So yeah, I think it was really useful, and it broke down the type of PETs really well and the risks involved. I think it's very much a group effort. I think we're trying to do as much as we can, but we realize that it's not just the regulators, and I think you acknowledge that in the report, that there's various players involved that need to try and help and push responsible adoption of PETs. But yeah, no, really enjoyable read.
Thank you so much, Paul, for those kind words, and we couldn't agree more on the notion that this is a group effort. And to that end, to the next member of our group, I'd like to go to Michel for your reflections.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna to paraphrase a Paul's comment on the report. It is indeed very interesting because it's pointing out use cases, which is indeed respects the most useful way to approach this important issue. Clearly, there's a lot of conclusion around regulatory certainty and visibility. It's clearly a demand we see from the markets on what PETs can bring to their regulatory issues clearly, and that's a focus from CNIL to see how we can bring visibility and certainty on the issue. So clearly, it's really compelling to us on the work we are doing at CNIL on PETs. Clearly, another point is PETs on AI. It's for us an important use case, not the only one. As that was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of, especially for example in the financial services, there's a lot of sectors where PETs can bring a difference. But clearly, AI is for us a use case that is really interesting to demonstrate the viability and the interests of PETs. Another point is clearly there's the elephant in the room, that is the anonymization issue. It's clearly an issue for AI with the model. You are tuning your model that may return at the end personal data, and you can also input new personal data when you're using that model. So there's some kind of a chain of responsibility, and clearly PETs can help to ease this chain of responsibility and ease the use by enterprise of AI model. So it's clearly for us a key point in trying to simplify the chain of responsibility with GDPR on the use of AI models. And also, I will clearly agree with with Paul that and it's also something we've seen at the OECD's experts group on PET. It's not only a call for regulators' action. It's a call for public policies, for innovation, for there's a lot of government entities that can help the spread, the development of pets. So, but clearly this report is really, very interesting, and clearly when focusing on use case, and clearly we are working with OCDE on, repository for use case. It's clearly for us a good way forward.
Thank you so much, Michel. And you identified an elephant in the room for us. Hopefully we have a pet that can help us tame the elephant, if you will. And you also noted the importance of public policy supporting in addition to regulation. And I think that's an interesting point to explore further here. And finally, you mentioned the OECD and the important work they're doing. And that's a nice transition to Christian to take your initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And first of all, congratulations for the report. Indeed, a very interesting one, as my pre-speaker panelists highlighted. And we're actually also very happy that it is in line, obviously, also with our priorities, given that we are also working on our report on pets and AI. So in that respect, yes, we appreciate the fact that it's essentially confirming that our observation that this is a key area that is obviously attracting a lot of attention. I would also express my appreciation for the fact that there is actually recognition. You could argue that it could be made stronger, but I think it's fairly done on recognizing that obviously there are different types of AI. Obviously, there is a strong emphasis this day on Gen AI. For some people, it may actually be equivalent when you say AI to mean Gen AI. But I think it's important to remind the audience that AI has been quite out there for a long time, and not everything is Gen AI. I think there is language in the paper that to acknowledge that. What I do appreciate in that respect is and I think that's key, and that's also something we are addressing in our report, obviously, is the recognition of the AI lifecycle. I mean, some of you who have followed the OECD work know that we actually introduced an AI system definition that has been kind of key, also including in legislation like the AI Act. And obviously that definition has been driving our work, and I'm happy to see that the recognition that AI is undergoing different phases, or there are different phases in the training of AI models, is recognized in the report. I would also express appreciation for the fact that there is recognition that it's important to have use cases. I think this is something that has driven the OECD work from the beginning, because it's easy to talk about pets in the abstract, but it's really when you start looking into specific use cases that you see the specific challenges. Speaking of, I think there is, I mean, we basically at some point in time have chosen to also move a little bit away, introduce a abstraction layer to the use cases, because what we find out is that when you talk about when you aggregate and have a more analytical approach to use cases, it's also important to have a not necessarily helicopter view, but somewhere in the middle to provide insights about use cases. And I think that's something that is definitely beneficial as well. If I may then introduce more specifically something where I see there could be room for improvement. It's done, but I think it's important to stress this out more strongly and to remind people that it's important. I mean, it was said, and it's said in the report, that obviously PET is not a silver bullet and so on. But I think it's also very important to remember that it's we have a tendency to talk as PETs as single kind of solutions, in the sense that one PET is going to solve it, and very often it's a combination of PETs that does the job. And one of the challenges that we find that we still face, I would argue, is a kind of a systematic way how to know how to combine different PETs. And I think that's something that is, I mean, I'm not expecting that the report would solve everything. I'm just saying, in my desire to have solutions for all the problems that we see in the area of PETs, that's definitely one of those solutions, or one of the problems that we see that where there is a need to be addressed. And one, maybe ending on a positive note, more positive note, let's say, is the appreciation of the recognition that pets is not only about regulation, kind of connecting to what Michel highlighted, but also recognizing that the benefits of pets, and this was clearly shown, is it goes beyond just privacy compliance and regulatory compliance, goes towards benefits, towards enabling collaboration, and providing some added values. And I think that's an important message that we need to remind people about when it comes, in particular, when we try to sell and make an argument to, let's say, business leaders, CEOs of companies, why they should invest in pets. Regulatory compliance is just one argument that can sell to sell pets, but I think it's important to remind also of the economic benefits, which is also one of the reasons I think the aspect of the economics of pets needs further exploration, which we hope to do. Sorry if I may have been too long.
Not at all. Your points are extremely well taken. We appreciate such thoughtful feedback. Just a quick response on a few points. Your recognition of the distinction between generative AI and other types of AI. This is a point CIPL has sought to explore through a parallel work stream going back to 2018, looking at tensions between data protection and AI, and then more recent writing specifically on Gen AI. It's an important point to continue to emphasize that different use cases of AI have different needs, and pets can play a different role. So that's very well taken. I'm going to maybe coin a phrase based on another of your points. I'm hearing a call for roadmaps for systematic combination of pets. I'm looking at single ones to how do we know how to put them together, and a theme for us to explore. And we could not agree more that this is not just looking at mitigating risk, but creating opportunity for innovation and adding value. So very well taken. On that note, going to you, Sarah, as a representative of one of the world's most innovative companies. So can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Well, I thank you. I think I just want to start off by kind of highlighting what other speakers had said. Maybe that's a reflection of your lineup here that we're in a fair bit of agreement. I think the first thing, as Paul said, is pets is a group project, and I think we very much agree with that. There is a huge role for government and practitioners, for government, and I would say whole of government. We were going to talk a lot about regulatory incentives. Those are incredibly important, but even, within government broadly, there's a lot for contracting and procurement, for example, standard setting bodies. So regulation, just one part of the whole government, I think, life cycle. Very much a huge role for practitioners in industry, both in educating people about pets, sharing the research and know-how that we have, implementing it in our product, sharing case studies, communicating the business incentives, which I think we're going to get to a little bit later. And then also academia, research, civil society. A lot of the great advances have come from academia and then been implemented at scale and in speed and in practice in companies. So I do want to make sure that we're talking about the whole ecosystem of pets, because there's very much a role for everyone to play. And I think also highlighting what Christian said about the distinction between AI and Gen AI. Generative AI is incredible advances, as we've seen just in the past couple of years, but maybe have different considerations that we need to take into consideration. There may be pets that work better or not as well, or maybe a bit more nascent, given the different technical functionality of generative AI. So it's important, I think, to make that distinction, but and not forget about how AI is across a bunch of different products, and that there's still very much a conversation that needs to be had about pets and AI today, as well as we look forward to the future of Gen AI and elsewhere. I think if you hear one term a lot, it probably will be the term panacea. And I'm glad that the report made that so clear, that as exciting as pets are, as much as we see that they are an opportunity, I think the report did a great job of being very clear-eyed and thoughtful about that pets are not going to be a silver bullet solution. They're not going to solve all of our problems, even within the world of privacy. They are worth investing in. They are worth using. They are incredibly important and a great opportunity, but they are not everything. And I think it's just really important to highlight that, because we don't want to get into an instance where we're engaged in privacy washing, where we're just throwing kind of pets and maybe not being fully considerate of, are we using the right pet for the right purpose? Are we using it, tuning the dials in terms of how we implement pets just right? So it's really important to talk about using pets responsibly, not just using pets. And I think there's a lot of nuance that we're going to talk to today about how to do exactly that. I think the other thing that the paper I thought did quite well was, and I think can always use more conversation. It sounded like Christian was teeing up a whole other paper for CIPL, and I also would love more paper and work from CIPL on pets work. So apologies to you all for creating work in this webinar, but it's a really important conversation. And that's that not all pets are suited for all purposes. I think there's still a lot of conversation that we all need to have about the different techniques and how they can be used when we hit certain thresholds and what those appropriate thresholds are, and how we consider pets in kind of a broader context of threat models. So what is the privacy risk we're trying to kind of guard against? Fairness, utility, and I would put scale and speed in that conversation, but also things like fraud and abuse detection, which are really incredibly important for us practitioners that are implementing these systems. And then various regulatory obligations. So we've talked very much about the privacy conversation, but I think maybe Eden was speaking earlier about the need to talk to a lot of other regulators and stakeholders in this space. And so it is a broad context. And we want to make sure that we are getting that fit for purpose in terms of our pets. And I'm really, really grateful that the paper also called out the pets and how they can be used together. I think Christian's quite right. That maybe we all don't have enough clarity of how that can all work together. But I think we'll all, hopefully in this conversation and in future conversations, talk about these. There are a bunch of different use cases. There may be trade-offs, right? You may use differential privacy in this instance, but it has this drawback. Well, if you add in this technique over here, that can kind of balance it. This is all going to be very use case specific. And so I think that goes back to earlier comments about how important use cases are, but this idea of combining and understanding the different technical modalities. Are you talking about a classification system versus a generative system? How do the pets work together in that instance? And then what the factor is of in terms of risk. Are we looking at low, medium, or high? I think that can help us tune these dials. And that's, I really think how Google thinks about pets and the combination of pets is it's a series of dials, almost like a very complicated audio system, or perhaps when you look inside a cockpit, there's a bunch of different things that you can turn the dials on, and that may depend on, again, these other factors in this broader consideration. And then just the last thing, and I don't think this is going to be something we talk a lot about, but I did want to mention just briefly in this conversation is how important pets are in the conversation of the data sharing mandate. I think we've seen where that is something that's more and more in terms of a policy conversation. Certainly, we've seen that in the DMA and questions about the privacy versus utility. I don't know that we should necessarily always think about it in that binary. But certainly it's growing now in the US in the context of Google search. And so pets can be incredibly important to ensure that we have privacy protections, which I think is what we all want out of this conversation. So I think a lot of good things that came out of this paper, I did want to highlight those, but maybe just going back to what Christian was saying, more work to be done in this instance and elsewhere to help continue the conversation.
Sarah, thank you so much to respond to there. I won't hit all the great points you made now, but I will on a couple of things. You talked about, as others have, pets not being a silver bullet. Maybe we can extend the analogy. Maybe they're one arrow in the quiver, one tool among several that we can use to address the problems we care about. And you gave a memorable phrase to keep in mind, which is while avoiding privacy washing, I think you said. And that's a phrase I will take away from our discussion today. I think you made an important point about the life cycle, not only of AI, but of the life cycle of pets and their own development. The notion that some of these are quite developed already, and they're kind of already quite tested and proven in terms of their capacities. Others are very exciting, but nascent, right? And still being developed, and especially in specific use cases. So that's something for us to think about further. Another point, which already came up in the Q&A I saw, and has been, Paul, thank you for addressing, is around risk assessment. At CIPL, we always believe systematic and careful risk assessment is key to good privacy governance and operations. And you've underscored why that's important in the pets case as well. And you've also given another use case that's important for us to consider, which is data sharing. All right, I want to go next to another leading practitioner, Antigoni. Over to you.
Thank you. So I will mention some other points. A lot of great points have been said. So what struck me the most was that the document mentions this plethora of applications based on pets, which is actually great to see. For example, when I joined the firm 6 years ago, it was very hard to find a person that could even understand or like even know what is secure computation. And we were trying to put something in production and they were asking me who else is using that, okay? And there was nobody. And there was also no high-level document to talk about the complexity of it, what it can enable. So I could only show some mathematical technical papers, which was not helping. So it was very challenging. And it's fantastic that you put together all these documents because now we can have a reference and educate people more about these technologies. And as I said, like how complex they are. And it's great to also see that a lot of firms put a lot of resources and a lot of investment in these technologies. And they recognize how complex they are. And even like from my experience too, for example, I'll talk about this encrypted large language models where we encrypt the queries to the LLM. So we know that full homomorphic encryption is not like super fast, right? So they recognize the fact that now we can do this today, but it's only great for like summarization queries when you can actually ask the LLM to give you a summary of something where you can actually wait, okay? And in fact, we also are working on that, but they recognize the fact that it's not very fast. It cannot give you like a Q&A today, like a chatbot. So we're doing research on that, but I think it's important to say how complex they are and when they will be more ready to do like other applications. So I think it's perfect to talk about this complexity that pets have. And of course, like all of these technologies, and I see from the firms, they always put the client first. So they want to offer privacy, comply with the regulations. Again, the regulations are also like for the clients. So it's actually great to see. And again, I will highlight that we have a point of reference to show to people that they are not aware of what these technologies can enable.
Antigoni, thank you so much. You've identified exactly the role that we're hoping that these sort of papers fill, which is between the brilliant folks like you who are writing those papers with the mathematical formulas and helping connect that to those who are on the front line of managing privacy governance and compliance and giving a bit more literature that can show them some robust solutions that may be available. Your point is also really well taken on the fact that some solutions like homomorphic encryption, fully homomorphic HE can be very helpful, but all pets have limitations, and often we talk about trade-offs internally and identifying the trade-offs, and I think you've given us a good example of that already. Last but definitely not least, again, Alexandra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Again, many points were already made that I strongly agree with. Some I disagree with, but in the interest of time, I will focus on the latter and things I can contribute that weren't yet said. So for me, one maybe not surprise, but definitely something welcome to see was that the report again focused on the adoption and the opportunities that privacy-enhancing technologies bring, as highlighted also with these great use cases and case studies that were shared. The thing that really surprised me the most when we think back to the presentation from Adam and this nice grid of different areas of the life cycle was that there was no check mark next to synthetic data for data collaboration. Why? Because in contrast to all the other PETs that were listed there, it's actually the only privacy-enhancing technology that allows data collaborations for humans. So where humans can actually come together, look at a privacy-safe version of a data set and use that on the one hand to innovate together. But when we think also in many other areas, for example, assess data sets from a fairness perspective, inclusivity, etc. So this was one thing that really surprised me. One thing where I saw a little bit of room for improvement was with the privacy issues that were highlighted in context to synthetic data. Of course, I fully agree with Bojana's statements and the statements that were made before. There is no silver bullet, no panacea out there. Fully subscribe to that. But what I would have wished for was a more balanced view, because even though you need to properly mitigate privacy risks when you create synthetic data, when you contrast it to the alternative legacy anonymization technologies, masking, obfuscation, and the like, which are still widely used today, we already now know from research that synthetic data is significantly safer. So I think balancing and contrasting that for a reader who might is not aware about that would have been helpful to facilitate adoption and also create certainty, plus also drawing on a fabulous point that Bojana made at a OECD roundtable during the Paris AI Action Summit, focusing on the cost of not using privacy-enhancing technologies, not opening up data access to policy officers, research communities, etc. Also highlighting and alluding to the fact that every tech CEO, every politician is talking about AI's great potential for AI for health, AI for combating the climate change. But if we don't have data available, then I'm really skeptical that we will reap that benefit. So I think that's also a balanced view to be taken, not to say that starting tomorrow, every organization should go out and throw their synthetic data assets or any other privacy-enhanced data assets over the fence and opening them up to the public, which arguably would be a big step and maybe too big of a risk, but starting with smaller steps to get into the trust, into the experiences that you can collect for that to gradually build up, I think is an important route towards adoption. Smaller point, the model collapse that was mentioned, not necessarily and not really an issue for the type of synthetic data that we talk about in a privacy and anonymization context, because there it's always an original data set that you train from, which is a vastly different scenario than the large language model synthetic content and then using that data that ChatGPT and others spit out to feed it again into your LLM and having this model collapse. So that was something that I have a different view. Extending on what Christian and Sarah said about AI not being equal to Gen AI, also Gen AI doesn't equal all Gen AI systems. And when we think about the recommendation to think about the energy consumption, obviously a valid point for the Gen AI ecosystem, but specifically for synthetic data, state-of-the-art models are factor 1,000, 10,000 more energy efficient than even mid-sized large language models. So that's again something I think needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And lastly, I'm a little bit skeptical about the focus on combining different PETs when our objective is to facilitate adoption. I fully agree that there are many interesting use cases that can only be tackled when we combine different PETs, but we must not forget that the overall maturity level, the mass adoption of PETs is not very far, and starting out with the more complicated stacking use cases, which adds complexity and makes everything harder for people to get started, might not be the road we should focus on when adoption is the objective. Of course, thinking it through, if you're organization size Google who thinks about stacking tools to make them in a commoditized and customized solution for a wide range of customers, then yes, maybe. But if you're even a little bit smaller than the Googles of the world, it's might too early to focus on the stacking use cases. I have a few more points, but I'm stopping here in the interest of time.
Alexandra, thank you. And first of all, it's important to have a range of perspectives. So we appreciate the differences that you have pointed out. Just to respond to a couple of points quickly. One, on your notion about accounting for counterfactuals, accounting for opportunity cost. I'll link back to our discussion with Sarah on risk assessment and we would submit that that's part of doing a great risk assessment, right? Is accounting for what the other options are and what you would be doing if you weren't doing what you're doing now. So that point's well taken. Would also note it's very easy for us to default to focusing on risks and opportunities around privacy, for example. And you've really made an important point. And when we're doing risk assessment, we want to be thinking about things outside of the data privacy model, right? Like the benefits you point out on energy efficiency, which are very well taken. I think on your point on combination or not, I think a broader takeaway I have is case studies are great, but back to the point that Christian made on leveling up and trying to actually distinguish different case studies from each other to know the specific solutions that may apply for different ones and not overgeneralizing from a specific case, but distinguishing the different applications. Your point again, really well taken. Let's continue in this vein around specific implementations, case studies, and applications. Sarah, I'd like to turn to you now and to kind of look deeper at these questions of business impact of PETs. So when Google is looking at developing or deploying AI, can you take us just another layer or two deeper about the role that PETs are playing?
Yeah, happily. And I think maybe I can do this by providing a few examples, one that's probably well-known, one that's maybe a little bit more recent and less known, to talk about how we're seeing kind of these business initiatives. And then I can get into generative AI and some of the PETs we're looking at there. I think PETs are always something that we are thinking about in terms of like developing, figuring out kind of new improvements to existing techniques. learning as we go, sharing that is very important to us. But also figuring out how we can implement this in products, but how do we also make sure that those products are doing what they're supposed to, right? Delivering a really great feature to our users, whether that's enterprise users, direct consumers, you name it. So one, I think pets can be really helpful in terms of spurring innovation, both in terms of unlocking new understanding of how technology works for us, but also a feature that we weren't able to offer, or that we're able to offer because we have used pets. I think can also open up new innovation for other businesses. So the example I go to here is the busyness feature in Maps. So we use aggregate and anonymized data, a suite of techniques here for users who have opted into Google location history. And we surface that in Google Maps. So if you look up a service provider or a restaurant, post office, you name it, you might see where there's features that can give you popular times, visit duration, wait time, so you can get a good sense of, is this a good time to go to that place or not? And what we've seen with small businesses in particular, that they're gaining a lot of insights into their customer flow, and they can optimize their operations. So they can think about staffing for busy times or less busy times, inventory management for customers that can help to know if that's a good time for you to go to that, if you're going to have a long wait time, or if maybe you want to skip it. And as we saw during the pandemic, it can also help make informed decisions about social distancing. So that was like a really nice popular feature where we were already collecting the data, but being able to provide a service to users and to businesses in a really privacy preserving way. It can also help protect against harm such as ID theft, security breaches. But what we think is really exciting is it can open new revenue lines. It can attract financing, which can be particularly important, I think, for the startup ecosystem. Help access markets, right? Navigating cross-border data flows, and really kind of fortifying trust in those services and data flows. An example here is client-side encryption that we've rolled out in Google Workspace, so that customers of Google Workspace can add a whole other level of encryption to their collaboration and communication, which we know can be really important, especially in uncertain times. And that one's really exciting because Google can't even decrypt because the user controls the keys. So a really interesting, I think, rollout there. But the one I'm really excited about that is a little bit more recent, and I think maybe getting into Antigoni's world just a little bit, but it's where you can use pets to save money, which is not something that we think about. I think a lot of people frame pets as a cost, and it certainly is in terms of computation, power and infrastructure, staffing, research, integrating into your product roadmap, but saving money, I think, is really important. And this one, I talk about our collaboration with SWIFT, the International Banking Consortium. So we've seen that conventional fraud detections in banks, or I think in fraud detection more broadly, it's hard to keep up with increasingly sophisticated criminal tactics. And it's hard to fight on a entity by entity basis. But I think there's also a challenge in collaborating and sharing data that is proprietary to the business, that may be sensitive under a regulatory framework. And so that can hinder the need to improve these fraud detection methods that can go across multiple banks and multiple jurisdictions. And so we have a pilot project on combating fraud in cross-border payments with SWIFT, also Rhino Health and Capgemini, where we've worked with a bunch of different pets together to develop anti-fraud technologies that are using advanced AI to have a really privacy-preserving solution so that financial institutions can collaborate without sharing that information. So getting the insights without sharing the actual raw data in order to better detect fraud. And as we know, fraud in banking can have national security implications. It can have consumer protection implications, and it can just cost billions of dollars. And so we're really excited about this new partnership and excited to see what else privacy enhancing technologies can do in that sphere. And so we don't talk a lot about saving money. And so I really wanted to highlight a really good use case of pets in that instance. In the AI and Gen AI world and how we're thinking about pets in product development, I go to a quote from James Manika, who's one of our leads for research in science and technology and is deeply thoughtful about AI and the opportunity that it has. and the need to be responsible to realize that opportunity. He talks about how the only way to be bold in the long term is to be responsible from the start. And so privacy is a critical component, I think, of being responsible from the start. And so even in the generative AI world, where we're making announcements regularly, I think in terms of advancements, both on our models and how those are being implemented in our products, is thinking about scrubbing and filtering, deduplication. I think these are pretty much industry standard at this point in terms of development, and really thinking about kind of the vanguard of PETs research that is not quite right for prime time. In this, I may think about techniques like combining differential privacy with synthetic data to have even more protections in that instance, or unlearning, which is a really kind of exciting, like at the forefront, but again, not quite ready, to quote SNL, not quite ready for prime time there to do full development. But I think that just shows how important it is to improve the techniques that we have in production today, and to improve our understanding of them, to improve our testing of them, to make sure they're working as intended, but to continue to move forward to this more kind of vanguard research, so that we aren't just staying static, that we're innovating as much on that privacy innovation as we are on the actual product feature. So hopefully there'll be a lot more kind of coming from us and from others in this space to do more. But I do want to say it's not just business opportunities. Again, we've seen in the AI context, governments that invest in AI and that are working to realize those benefits really have first mover advantage. And that's really due to a pro-innovation framework. A pro-innovation framework does not mean that you set aside privacy or other critical components. But I think it's worth thinking about how we can all work together to make those smart advancements.
So many great examples there, Sarah. I just want to respond to, I can't respond to all of them now because there's so much to say, but I will say on the example you gave on Swift and some of the related ones, it really gets into PETs as an enabler for trustworthy cross-border data flow, as well as services that rely on those data flows. And I think it's a moment where we're all trying to figure out how to make those happen in a secure way. And you pointed out a key role that PETs can play there. And again, you've underscored the notion of PETs as not only a compliance solution, but one that is a value creation solution and innovation solution. To your last point, really appreciate the examples. I'd like to extend the sort of building our dossier of interesting examples to Antigoni, and talking about in the financial world, how you've already previewed a bit some of how PETs are enabling you to enable the use of data and AI systems, but we'd love to hear some more depth on your examples. Over to you, Antigoni.
Yeah, great. So I want to say that first, what we have done is that we have like a lot of different expertise. For example, they have the research and in research, we have like expertise in secure multi-part computation, homomorphic encryption, all the PETs. We also have experts on synthetic data, because for some use cases, you don't necessarily need to use PETs. You can just do it with synthetic data. So that's also important, because sometimes people want to jump immediately to PETs, but you can just use synthetic data. So we also have expertise on that. And the point here is that we also count the expertise of the business, because when we want to solve their problems, we are in close collaboration with them on what exact problems they want to solve. And even on the research perspective, some of the problems that they're asking us, they're not being solved. So it's great actually to do research when you get constant feedback from the business. And that actually helps a lot to also hear what are their needs. And moreover, for some of the products that we have, for example, the primers that I mentioned, which is actually privacy preserving auctions. But before we put in production, we were even like going and asking the feedback of the clients too. So we are getting feedback from all of the sources. I'm going to give you like two examples. For example, we have this application with the Office of Fair Lending. So, in the US, there's the concept of credit score. So each person has its own credit score, and there are actually vendors that provide the scores, which they're called FICO and Experian. So JP Morgan is using their models, and they're claiming that their AI models are fair, okay? That they give an answer which is fair. And so before we want to invest and buy their models, we cannot really check that they're fair, because they don't want to give us their models, right? So what we do, we use the technique of zero knowledge proofs. to prove actually they are proving that their model is fair without us having access to their model. So this is one use case that we have, again, in collaboration with the business. We figured out that this is an interesting use case. And now it's in a pilot. And then another one that I want to mention, I'm not going to mention the fraud because Sarah spent a lot of time on it, which is also very important. I'm going to mention about payments. So, like everybody's moving to biometric authentication. And there are a lot of companies that offer biometric authentication, where basically it's a combination of AI and privacy-preserving technologies. However, if you see across the board, all of these companies, they are not really using PETs in the sense that they are like storing an encrypted version of your biometric data. Actually, they don't. So they store your biometric data in the clear. I'll give you an example with your palm, okay? So if they get the data, like they get your palm and they store it and there's a data breach, like your palm is not revocable. I cannot cut your hand. I can throw your credit card and give you another one, but I cannot give you new biometric information. So what we're doing, we are actually using PETs to enable this. And this is something else that, again, like it comes from the business. So in constant collaboration, we can figure out these use cases and also offer to the clients. And in all of these projects that I'm mentioning, there's also a research element, which is, I'm also excited about research, which is also something that I think you need the combination to be able to deliver the exact solutions that they want. I mean, I could talk more, but let's give the opportunity to the other ones to speak more.
Thank you so much, Antigoni. And your example is really compelling about the role of PETs and actually, I don't know if auditing is the right word, but really checking claims about fairness, and which is a value that we all share. But the question is how you actually can arrive at making those determinations. And you've really given a compelling example with zero knowledge proofs in that regard. Also heard you talking about the importance of actually speaking with the customers or your business clients to actually really understand the needs in depth and kind of collaborating to solve them. And I'm going back to Sarah's use of the word privacy washing, and you didn't name names, which was polite, about some cases where that may be happening, but that where with especially sensitive data like biometrics, that PETs can play a really key role in ensuring safe storage and use of that data. And I thank you for that. Alexandra, I want to turn to you and actually have you invite you to go more deeply on your points around synthetic data, and including on, if you wish to use this time to sort of expound on some of the points where we may have not had it quite right, but any way you might more broadly want to talk about the role of synthetic data in AI development and the role that they play. Over to you.
Sure, thank you. I will start actually with synthetic data's role for AI development, and inspired by a short mention that Antigoni just made about deciding, do you actually need privacy enhancing technologies or can you make it do with synthetic data? I think it's also always important to remind people that synthetic data still has a little bit of an identity crisis. There are many different flavors, many different types of synthetic data. I'm focusing with everything I'm going to say on the type of synthetic data that's not created out of thin air, but that actually has some real-world data that inspires what the synthetic data is about. There are mock data setup, simulation, et cetera, which all also can have benefits in the world of AI, but I'm focusing on the synthetic data use in the context of anonymization. And I think one of the most interesting advantages of synthetic data for AI development, particularly when we contrast it with the use of legacy anonymization technologies, is that it allows to use more granular data. So with legacy anonymization technologies, obviously we know you need to redact, sort around, mask, obfuscate parts of your existing data set to a quite severe extent, which limits what data remains for AI training. With synthetic data, the idea is to preserve the structure of your data set, basically to have all the 200, 500, 5,000 columns you had initially, to make them available, which is on the one hand interesting from an improved model performance perspective, but again, as I mentioned earlier, because it's also possible to give humans access to this data, explore this data, figure out if there are issues, for example, from a fairness perspective, representativeness perspective of the data, et cetera. The second benefit, adding on to that, is the explorability. So particularly in AI applications, I can't tell you in advance which of the fictitious 500 columns I mentioned earlier will be crucial to have a model that helps me to, I don't know, better predict customer churn, fraud, etc. So I can't use legacy anonymization technologies to that sense where I need to decide in advance, please give me column 17, 512, and I don't know, 430. It helps to have a structurally identical synthetic data set with all the columns to then figure out where are the interesting patterns that actually provide business value, help me to deliver better solutions to my customers. An interesting point is also in terms of data collaborations that I mentioned earlier, that many organizations that want to do AI not necessarily have the capacities in-house. So they're seeking to partner with AI providers, cloud providers, startups, etc., which of course requires data sharing from POC point up to some more intense data collaborations. So this again is where we see organizations getting huge advantages with synthetic data because it can just speed up this validation and collaboration cycles from having to wait to, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months, 4 months for a data asset to having this in a much shorter time span. An interesting thing that was just emerging in the past 1.5 years in the field of synthetic data is also the flexibility that it provides. So on the one hand, you can use it to just anonymize an existing data set and basically get a statistic replica of it. But to a certain extent, you can also modify the data to, for example, make it fairer. Again, not a panacea, not a solution to fairness, or even to upsample it and, for example, boost fraudulent cases. Again, also not the silver bullet to fraud cases, but a very, very interesting application for the financial services industry is actually the desire to have oftentimes simpler model structures for fraud detection because they are more explainable. And this is, again, an objective to try to optimize for. And there they have seen that using synthetically upsampled data sets, which have more signal strength on the fraudulent cases, actually allow also these weaker models in contrast to very sophisticated but complex deep learning models, for example, to pick up the fraudulent patterns better, therefore have a good performant model that's still explainable. And lastly, I think it's also interesting to think about synthetic data when we think about AI, not only in the development stage, but actually in the government's validation, testing, AI assurance space, where synthetic data is used for explainability purposes, but even for example, external audits, where you need to have granular examples available to see and kind of map out the potential constraints or limitation a model has, again, for example, from a fairness perspective. Stopping here because we don't have that much time to go in depth, but happy to elaborate if somebody wants to follow up.
Alexandra, thank you so much for taking us that several levels deeper on synthetic data. And you make a really important point on sort of distinguishing the very important role of masking and obfuscation from these, but also the importance of these broader functionalities that synthetic data can unleash, this ability to do, I like to use the word explorability by preserving that basic structure of the data. And I'm glad you brought up collaboration again, because this actually links to whether it's across institutions, across jurisdictions. You're pointing out a role that synthetic data can play in fostering collaboration and making geography in those divisions among us less of an issue and helping to bring us together.
Absolutely. This reminds me, I forgot to mention cross-border data sharing, even within a multinational organization, which is also something that's oftentimes a legal challenge, as many of our listeners will know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alexandra. We've had some great case studies, and now in the next, over the next few minutes, I want to zoom us back out to kind of go back to looking more broadly at the global advantages of PETs and AI. And speaking of global, I want to go back to Christian from the perspective, you have had, Christian, a truly global perspective on these issues of PETs and their use in AI. How would you identify, more broadly speaking, in your look around the world at the impacts PETs can have on fostering trust, or this word that we've just been talking about, collaboration within and across jurisdictions? Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. I think we basically in the previous interventions addressed quite a number of this particular question. And I would like actually to maybe start by highlighting maybe why this question is important. Why is asking the question from a broader global perspective? And the reason is essentially, as was said, collaboration. There are a lot of use cases where collaboration has to happen at the global level. Yet what we see is a kind of a challenge is the fact that they may be, let's say, variable understanding across jurisdictions, across nations, across organizations about the benefits and limitation of privacy-enhancing technologies. And and I just want to take this opportunity maybe also to raise the point that in our works, at least, we have actually also put synthetic data within the realm of privacy-enhancing technologies. Just to flag that, because I noted the let's say the contrast of PETs and synthetic data. But I think in overall, there is definitely a need to have a common understanding of what PETs are, of the benefits, limitation of PETs. And that's also why we have decided not only to focus on use cases, which is a good tool to illustrate the benefits, but also to kind of have what we refer to in our work on as use case archetypes, basically trying to have an abstraction layer of PETs, because very often the use cases, yes, it may be true that if you are talking about the use case in the financial sector, it may be like fraud detection, it may be applicable to our other jurisdictions. But what we have also noted is that even some of the techniques, tools, and let's say implementation of PETs that I use, let's say for PETs fraud detection, can be applicable in the area of healthcare and in other contexts. And so there is definitely a need to have a discussion based on PETs and the use case that is cross-jurisdictional, comparable, and where we can basically have nevertheless a common reference point. And that's why at least at the OECD, we have decided to find ways how to systematize that discussion based on use case, which is challenging because, and this goes toward the answer of your question, because at different level of granularity, you can have that conversation on. And this is where we are currently at finding the right level of granularity when it comes to how abstract you want to go. Currently, in terms of the benefits, where we see a kind of a convergence and agreement on, is that we have identified two broader use case archetypes. One essentially being about collaborative data use for being used to test and to train AI models, or basically using input data for improving and collaborative AI model training. But the other use case family that we also noted was around the confidential sharing of AI models. And I think we addressed both in our discussion so far, but there is clearly a more stronger emphasis on the first type of family of use cases that we noted. But I will highlight that both use case archetypes are key and are common across jurisdiction, are common across different sectors. I will end there, and there's actually obviously an implication to that, but I think we will get to that, which is how do we also achieve a common understanding in terms of the regulatory requirements, where we definitely see a need also to establish a common understanding on the benefits and limitation of those PETs. But I'm sure we'll get to that point later on.
Christian, thank you. We'll try. I'm already realizing this has been such a great conversation, but our time is beginning to run a little short. So let's make sure we do come back to that point. I do want to call it again. You've described this notion of abstraction from case studies and really trying to group the lessons we're learning. Your work has really shown in that regard. And I meant to say it earlier, one service OECD has provided over and over is around giving us clear definitions for what the concepts that we're talking about. Your definition you talked about of AI systems is one we certainly go back to over and over. It's become a point of reference around the world. Would also point out you have done something similar in your work on PETs in terms of trying to classify and group. And we find that it's more than a detail. It's important for rigorous analysis and presentation of these case studies, so we're grateful for that. You also lifted up an example that we don't have represented super well here today, which is in healthcare and the importance of those examples. And there's certainly much more that can be said and written, and we hope to contribute to that going forward. I actually want to go, and speakers, it's a little bit out of order from the presentation I gave, but recognizing the limits on time, I want to go to Michel next because we haven't had the opportunity to hear from you in a few minutes, Michel. And you mentioned that you're leading this work on PETs in CNIL, and we noted and took great interest in what you called how-to sheets that you've produced around AI and PETs and AI. Can you talk more about the benefits that you see in integrating PETs into AI? And maybe if you could reference these how-to sheets that CNIL has published recently. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, and we reference it in the discussion. Clearly, we could see that the in our two sheets we published on AI, and we are going to finish the second batch of our two sheets at the beginning of June. We clearly see, and that was a question as well that was mentioned in the Q&A of the webinar, is the impact of the selection of data you have to take to train your model in AI. Clearly, when you're using PETs, it does not share, leads to more data. So these, PETs are a way to be sure that the data that are in the model are, made anonymous, and that's clearly for everyone in the industry, in the ecosystem. Clearly the biggest impact, and we at this stage, and that's also one of the O2 sheets we're going to publish at the end of May. It's around this, the status of the model. Is it anonymous or not? That is a question that has been asked to the various DPA in Europe at the end of last year. And there is no general answer to the question, are AI model anonymous or not? But clearly with PETs we can see that we may achieve that goal, and we are clearly as well focusing at CNIL to try to develop specific techniques to challenge an AI model and see if there is any personal data in it. And clearly, the as a regulator, we can only encourage the development of technologies and PETs that are really strengthening user privacy protection. And because there is some kind of we are really convinced that privacy is a way as well to structure innovation. And clearly, when Sarah mentioned that in some case there might even be a return on investment, that is use cases that are made possible through PETs, clearly. And also a question that has been raised about cross-regulation implementation of PETs, and that's we think we are going to see, especially in the banking industry, by working closely with our the banking regulator in France on how to promote new use cases around especially data sharing. So clearly we could see that's a question going beyond the how to sheets on how to give clarity. Clearly we could see, okay, there's a use case on where PETs or will be having clearly a return on investment from a compliance and regulatory point of view, especially on the fact that AI model can be anonymous or not. Clarity for us is going to be a big challenge. That is, because at some points, and especially, we have an issue in Europe on what can be anonymous or not. We know that there is position from the industry on, and the fact that's, a model or, data are anonymous. It's sometimes a area of discussion between regulators and the industries, but we're trying to, with AI model, to perhaps see in a different way, perhaps by testing it and see if, to give clarity and says, and that's our projects we're working at CNIL, is once you're using PETs to, especially during the training phase, and clearly that's one thing we're going to insist, you can always put PETs or filters on a model that is going to become a system, but we are also encouraging to have more open source model. And with open source model, you can't do filtering. So that's clearly PETs could be used during training. And at some point to see, we are going to try to, with the ecosystem, to build libraries of programs to check if the model is anonymous or not. So clearly give incentive. That is, if you're using the right PETs and clearly targeting the right set of data, then you can try to achieve, the incentive, that is, your model won't have any personal data in it, and so you won't have any problems to use it after that. So, but it's clearly for us a huge challenge to give clarity. As I said, we are also, with various decisions from the European Court of Justice on, the anonymous data. That's clearly for us a huge issue to see what are the right standards and the right tests to prove that data is anonymous or not. But clearly for us, PETs in AI is a use case we are working on to prove that there is an impact. And also as well, the second for us focus of work will be to see in sectors where PETs can really try to foster or develop new use cases, as Sarah mentioned, with the ability to share data amongst, for example, banks to deliver new services, especially in the concept of fight against fraud. So that's clearly cross-regulation, and with the arrival of the AI Act, clearly we're going to enhance and foster and develop that cross-regulation, and having a common views on PETs with other regulators will be key to find the right sectors, the right use case where PETs can make really a difference.
Michel, thank you so much. You took us back to the elephant and we danced around it a bit. That's great, and addressed this important question around anonymization, and there's more to come there. You've really been your institution a leader in this question of greater guidance that is practical and provides greater clarity. And we thank you for underscoring the role of that. And you also pointed out that this goes well beyond privacy regulation, right? And pointing at this cuts at the nexus of a variety of regulatory frameworks that are coming together, like the AI Act. Paul, I'm going to give you a challenging assignment here because we are now with 7 minutes left, and I want to give every one of our panelists a chance to say a final word. Paul, I want to give you an extra minute, though, to, first of all, perhaps dig in any further on this question of both regulation and potentially the role of incentives, and what you think is necessary going forward in those regards, based on the work ICO has been doing, but then to pivot from that into any final remarks you'd like to make, and then I'm going to go down the line and give everyone a chance for a final word. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Yeah, so as I said earlier, I think it's a group effort to increase PETs adoption. Ourselves, we've been very active in this space. We've obviously published the PETs guidance. We recently published our guidance on anonymization. We published a report on PETs adoption last year. We've been working closely with DCIT in the UK. We published a PETs cost benefits awareness tool. We have our sandbox and our innovation services that assess how PETs comply with data protection law. So we've done a lot around this space, but we realize there's still a way to go yet. I think in terms of what we can do, for example, there is probably further guidance we could look at on applying PETs to AI, applying PETs to ad tech and other use cases where PETs would provide benefits. We published some case studies already. I think there is there's always use in publishing additional case studies that can show best practice in various contexts. So I think that's useful as well. From the ICO, are always interested in working with other stakeholders. We've mentioned certification schemes in the past, and I think that'd be a useful avenue to explore. We've provided, I won't go into them now because we haven't got time, but we provided a list of potential interventions in this space that we think could help drive adoption of PETs. So I'd encourage people to read that report. And I think it's been really encouraging to hear the views of others on this call, and I know we're working closely with some of the organizations on the call as well with this effort. So and it's I think CIPL's work is very, very important in this space as well.
Paul, thank you so much. And rather than expound on the great points you've made, I want to give everyone a chance to have a final word. So I'd like to go next to Sarah for your final thoughts.
I'll be quick and potentially provocative here, just to close out the conversation. Though we talked whole of government is really important, as well as kind of whole of ecosystem and advancing PETs, I do want to call out two ideas that we think are worth consideration in terms of regulatory incentives. And the first one is legal frameworks that contemplate data that is still personal information, that's not anonymous, that's not pseudonymous, but where there's significant protections and or limitation of access, and creating a new category of that data, private or confidential personal information, and provide a lot of incentives around that. So those obligations for protection would be different than traditional personally identifiable information. This is where you can see PETs like TEEs, trusted execution environments, work, and we think can really help incentivize that collaboration across institutions, across borders. The second one is regulatory guidance and or kind of amendment to legal frameworks where there's an express indication that PETs are a compelling factor in an organization's legitimate interest balancing test. So that would be documented in accountability mechanisms that already exist. And no, CIPL has done a lot of work about accountability that can be drawn from here. But that those would be in accordance with specific criteria, but would kind of like essentially be a presumption factor in legitimate interest. So we think there's room for some creative thinking here. And we are ready to help and kind of inform guidance in these conversations. The last thing just on the regulatory guidance, a risk taxonomy can also be really helpful in addition to case studies. So again, helping to set out what these different factors are, what the risks are, what the privacy considerations that we should be prioritizing, and then we can kind of use case studies to fill in the rest of the puzzle. But thanks for this great event.
Love the provocative ideas in a good way. Thanks so much, Sarah. Much more to talk about. Antigoni.
Yeah, so I want to mention two very quick points on data utility. So, for example, we're also working on federated learning for fraud detection. So I want to say, when you go to the encrypted domain where everything is encrypted, you can also start getting like issues with data utility. For example, some user might poison the data or give the wrong data and not actually destroy the data utility of the model. So also there we need to care about protection to check if the inputs that all of these users put in federated learning are inside like some domain that we accept. So you can do these things with zero knowledge, but I want to point that we need to care a lot about data utility when we use PETs, and also with differential privacy too, because also the document talks a lot about differential privacy. So we always need to find what is the data utility when you use differential privacy. You cannot just add noise and then like don't have any utility. And in fact, we even have a product called Atlas X that we use differential privacy. And I want to make a point here with regulation. So the regulators were asking us, like, we are highly regulated. So when we were adding noise to the data, they were saying us, oh, you are lying about your data. You're not reporting your real data. But we were adding noise to that. So we had to spend a lot of time to explain to them, this is the technology and it works like that. So it was challenging, but at the end of the day, it was a happy story because they were convinced. So I want to say that it's actually good to also keep in mind all of these challenges that we can face.
Antigoni, thank you so much. That's very well taken. Alexandra, your last words.
Thank you. So 2 points. First, the question on global advantage of privacy enhancing technologies in AI. I think this possibility and enabling data democratization and open data is, for me, the single most promising application. One, as mentioned earlier, AI for good, but also when we think about enhanced access for public sector, startups, SMEs, particularly SMEs are the backbones of many economies, but they currently don't have data access. And the second topic, I think, is an interesting idea to explore when we want to think about how to actually facilitate adoption of privacy-enhancing technologies, going back to Sarah's point of seeing them not as a cost function, but as value add. Imagine we were to delete the internet. There would be public outcry because we know the value the internet brings to us. Data has similar potential as this important resource, but we're currently not tapping into it. So if we get, for example, the OECD and others involved to really fleshing out a functioning digital data ecosystem where different players can contribute, incentive mechanisms are thought through, value propositions are thought through, I think this would definitely focus the adoption of privacy enhancing technologies because they would be an integral part. So maybe wish list for Christian here that this is something I think from the back doors could help privacy enhancing technologies adoption.
Alexandra, thank you. Excellent bridge to Christian. Your final thoughts. You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I'm taking note of the homework, and I'm happy to also share that with my colleague and discuss how we can help. I think we can. So here is a kind of looking forward to that. But in terms of, to address your point, Matthew, I would like also to connect also to Sarah's point and also Antigoni's point, where I do understand basically that desire and that wish to go there. And I would add that maybe before we can go there, I think what we probably would need is also to have some kind of common benchmarking that allow us also to assess the quality of pets and how they function. And I think that this is something that is definitely missing. I understand that it is a hard problem, having talked to some of the researchers in the field, and in particular to establish some kind of standardized benchmarks. But my understanding also of the problem is that this would help not only the regulators to basically be able to assess to what extent pets fulfill they promise, but it actually would also be useful for, let's say, business decision makers, the CEOs of the companies, to basically make the necessary investment, because then they can do some calculated assessment of the benefits that comes with that. And I feel like we are still mapping benchmarks, standardized benchmarks for privacy enhancing technology. So this is why this is definitely one area that we are trying to address. It's hard, though.
Thank you, Christian. I love these. We're surfacing so many great final thoughts here on things, on homework, as the word was used. Michel, you get the last word from our panel.
Yeah, I think I won't add any, thoughts or ideas, because they were all, put by the other panelists, just to see that we still need to work together. Clearly, there's need to be more industry / regulators / governments common work to have a common understanding where pets can make a difference. What is the topology of pets? I have, we posited a few cases, and clearly for each use case, bring the regulatory, the business side to see where we can make all a difference, and try to work together, because we need, as a regulator, to better understand what the industry needs, where this can make a difference, and clearly differentiate where, from compliance point of view, pets can make a difference or not. And also, we have also to engage more in clarity, and that's kind of opinion and views we need to understand, and to better hear, I would say, to do better work on protecting data. So thanks again for inviting me. It was really helpful and really interesting.
Thank you so much, Michel. And fostering understanding is definitely a goal we've sought to advance with our discussion today. I want to thank also our attendees for making time and the terrific questions we had in the chat, and to thank our panelists for jumping right in to answer those. We look forward to hearing from attendees, your feedback on the event. We'd love to hear from you and stay in touch. Just a big final thanks to our panelists for a great discussion today. I look forward to continuing the discussion another time. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.